Thank you all for coming tonight. It's a dark time for elephants in Africa, and I thought rather than focusing on that, we're going to focus on how great elephants are and how amazingly similar they are to us, how their societies are set out, long-lived, intelligent animals. They have the same politics that we do, and I think the more that we focus on that, the more we might make better decisions about how to protect them. So my title is The Secret Life of Elephants, and what I'd like to do is just give you an overview of their life and some of our research and some of what we've been able to learn and apply back to elephant conservation. Now, elephant behavior can be extremely explicit, but I think many people think that elephants can also be very subtle. Now that we know that they're self-aware, this is the next step. It's a little hard to interpret their behavior, and sometimes even more difficult to interpret their behavior. And so this is what we have to deal with in the wild. But let me get a little more explicit about what I mean by how subtle these behaviors are. So let's take these two elephants up here. This old gentleman, Stoli, is standing next to the young Jack, who's trying to get his trunk into the trough. And that position is the source of the spring, and elephants like to drink fresh water. And it's very symbolic show of dominance. Let me turn this one on. To put your trunk in with the dominant bull. Can I get away with that? And the dominant bull has to decide, is this guy going to cause trouble if I let him do that? So here, Jack is trying to get his trunk right there. And Stoli's like, you're just not ready for this, I don't know. And so he's persistent, but then Stoli chooses a non-aggressive way to distract him. I'll just use you as a scratching post. You're really not ready for this. So there's very nice, gentle old bulls out there. But there's also another strategy. This guy's like, well, geez, if the dominant bull's not going to drink at the end, I'm going to. And he's like, no way, buddy, sorry. Give him a little tusk in the rump and send him on his way. So there's lots of different characters, a lot of different strategies for how to orchestrate your environment, how to deal with social situations. Here's an extended family reunion. The elephants are long-lived, they are migratory, they live in matriarchal societies where the young males will move out of the families and into bull groups or associations. These animals grow up within very strong, tight-knit families, where mom is the first member of the family that the baby learns about. And this is Liza, the star of the Baby Elephant book, and her mom, Winona. So once they are born and they bond with mom, then they have all these great extended family playmates. They have siblings, they have cousins, then they have extended visits from other cousins, and they drink together, they play in the mud together. They really, the females in these groups will bond for life. Now, they also have very similar rituals to ours. This trunk-to-mouth greeting, where you place your trunk in the other one's mouth, is exactly the same thing as a handshake, a sign of respect, a salute sometimes to a much more senior member, and it's learned at a very young age. Social bonds within extended families are developed and reinforced through these reunions, through tactile greeting rituals, and through vocalizations. Now, new matriarchs, it's interesting to know that they are not the daughter of the matriarch. They are the next oldest member of the family becomes the matriarch. This has been studied in Kenya, and what that means is that knowledge is more important than blood. Now, we're finding some discrepancies here that I'll tell you a little bit about. But let's talk about matriarch character, because that really defines the group. Some of them can be tentative, curious, some are more wary, and some will charge first and ask questions later. And then a more confident matriarch will assess danger before doing anything about it. Now, these confident matriarchs also help make a better plan, a more reasonable plan. This is Big Mama, and she and another younger member of the family kneel down together and pull a baby out of the trough. Very coordinated, no fuss, just, okay, we go down and pick the baby up. Whereas in another scenario, this is Mia of the athletes. She's a very young matriarch, and you can see her group of very young females. They don't really know what to do, but she just scoops the baby out for them. But then you have another situation where everyone's like, well, I don't know what to, if I pull here, will that help? Or maybe not. So the level of coordination really goes with the experience of the matriarch, and just another benefit to these sort of coalitions, coordinated behavior. This is Big Mama, and she's lining up to charge a female from another area that has come in and taken over the water hole, and she's like, no, wait, no, this is our home, you're not doing that. And they come marching in, very formidable, but they don't win. Here's the interloper just scatters them, chases them off, which is really surprising. But it's just another one of those mysteries. I would have thought she could beat them, but maybe she's too nice, I don't know. Now, another question is, when you look at character development of these family members that play such a dominant role in your life, you have to wonder, well, what kind of influences does that character have on the next generation? So my title here is, Do Cowgirls Beget Cowboys? Now, character can be shaped at a very young age, influenced by the matriarch, mother, siblings, and the rank of their mothers. Now, from a very early age, you can see this kind of activity where one could pull on a baby's trunk and become a bully, whereas another one would reach out and say, no, no, stop. That maybe the peacemakers are stopping the bullies. I don't know, but they've got the same thing going on with these youngsters. Some of them are pushing, always, teasing, and other ones, no. So it's kind of interesting to then map that against their mothers and their matriarchs to see what kinds of characters you get. Now, as I mentioned earlier, some family members that we're seeing are, as an animal farm language, are more equal than others. If a matriarch's offspring interacts with the lower ranking offspring, there seems to be ramifications. There seems to be a bloodline that's drawn at the offspring of the mothers, which then would call into question, if the matriarch is the next in line, if the next oldest is the next matriarch, how could that be if there's already this bias between bloodline and lower ranking individuals outside that bloodline? So that's something that we're currently working on. But here is an extended family, and just to show you how these ranking situations work, as this extended group comes to the waterhole, as they get closer, the lower ranking individuals know that there's no way that they're going to get on this trajectory and get to the head of the trough, so they are going to go all the way around the back and drink in the very salty pan. Whereas this group knows there's no question about it, I've got a beeline for the best water, and I'm going straight for it, and I'm going to get it. Whereas this group is like, well, I'm not even going to bother because I know what will happen. And this is where, again, this question of royalty, and I wrote an article about that in Smithsonian Magazine, March 2013, if you want to read more about that. One character in this situation was particularly dramatic, Paula and her new calf, Bruce. We saw three females, low-ranking females in three different families, being ostracized, pushed out. And this is her baby. He's losing milk. She's having a hard time protecting him, and she's not even allowed to stand in with the rest of the group and help shade the baby. So there's something really off going on here, and we think, well, If optimal foraging theory says that you have a minimum size in order to maintain fitness, and that might be 15 up to 30 individuals, people had always talked about it as a passive process, not an actively forcing out of the lower-ranking individuals. So again, this is something that we've come up with in the last couple of years, and we don't quite understand it. Maybe a desert culture with so little water has to be more rigorous in defining their group sizes, which comes out to not very nice behavior to the lower-ranking individuals. Now, we're also looking at gender differences between calves versus the ranking of mom, and we find that male calves stray further than mom, and dominant calves tend to be more social. Now, when a young bull starts to mature, he starts to do what a lot of human bulls will do and go out and cause trouble with other species that are dangerous and even more dangerous, and cause trouble with his siblings. And finally, mom says, okay, it's time to go, which he is not happy about. He is happy about, he's not happy about. This goes on for several years. But what happens in the end, you can see how he towers over the rest of his family. It's pretty much time to go. And so he has to figure out how he's going to negotiate this society of adult males, which looks sort of like an intimidating wall. But when you look closer, you'll see that each one of these guys has a particular character. Some of them like to take in youngsters, and some of them don't. Now, in this whole population of over 200 males that we're monitoring, we have a catalog set out to be able to tell who's who, and this is our most dominant bull, Greg. This is Willie Nelson here and Gakulu. And it does really help to have names as well as ear tags and numbers. It does help. Now let's go to Namibia, where these field studies take place. Elephants in Namibia live in the desert, scrub desert, woodland savanna, and riverine habitats. This is Etosha National Park. So in Africa, this is where Namibia is on the southwest coast. Etosha's towards the top. And we are up here in the northeast corner of the park. And just to show you that corner of the park, it has elephant-proof fencing, but the elephants don't really care about that. This is the dry season pattern, and wet season, there is corn out here, and we're going out to get it. So those are some of the issues that one has to deal with. Every day, the fencing team has to fix the fence. We help them when we're there by measuring footprints and trying to figure out who the culprits are and how to minimize these conflicts, figure out what about the electrical fencing we can help make stronger. But this is our field site. It's a temporary camp with a permanent tower and a bunker. This is 20 meters from the waterhole, 80 meters from the waterhole, and this is where most of our action happens. Now, it's strange to be a tourist where you are standing by yourself watching the world go by. Usually you are moving through the environment, but here the animals are moving through the environment and defining your day for you. Our bull day starts about 10:30, 11 in the morning, goes throughout much of the day, and then by the late afternoon, evening, the families finally show up. And then they come into the night. And here is the inside of our camp with our camp kitchen, and everything's run off of solar. Now, to get down to the business of figuring out behavior as you're sitting in your research platform and there's all these guys out there interacting, how do you make sense of it? You know, there's really affiliative behaviors and then aggressive behaviors. Who does what to whom when, and how do we make sense of it? So here's Greg. Here's how you interpret this situation here. He is walking into the waterhole. We have the second and third ranking bulls at the head of the trough. But now they see him, they were drinking, now they see him, they're going to leave because they don't want any problems with the Don when they're trying to drink at the head of the trough. They'll just let him drink. And his mid-ranking best buddy here, he faces him square on. Now, penis signaling is really important in elephants, and he sort of dropped his penis. He's a little bit scared. and he turns sideways. And so he's not going to confront him, turn sideways, let him go. And that's how you would score this interaction. You would say, so Greg, and aggressive, let's say, aggressive ear flap towards Kevin, which is the second-ranking bull. So in the moment, you type in your data logger exactly what's happening between each one of those bulls, and you can put together a score sheet. And if you look at Greg, he does not lose at any time except for with Gakulu, the big Zulu bull. That's the only bull that he will win only half the time. So this is how you can put together a score sheet and put this together over years. So what you can do if you're doing this for several years in a row, you can say, okay, so Greg is the most dominant, and this is a linear hierarchy with all of the other bulls, means that A always wins contest with B, C, D. But when you have a really wet year, so climate has an impact on social interactions here. In dry years, your affiliative behaviors, you're more affiliative. In wet years, you're more aggressive. What happens, there's not as much oversight over the youngsters. They get a little more aggressive and feisty. They might even show signs of must because they don't have to kowtow to the Don and drink only from one spot. They can go anywhere. So this is how, as an example of how the environment can define certain social interactions. And in all of that data that we collect, we're also looking at who's associated with who and how often do they come in together and how bonded are they from year to year. The other thing that we collect are hormones and DNA from their fecal samples. So we know each one of these bulls in here, who they are, and we collect. This is brought back in from out here. We have a fecal map, and so we know that, Dave on July 7th is right there, and we keep a pretty close eye on the situation. And that helps us look at cortisol levels, stress throughout the season, stress after a specific interaction, or testosterone levels during must, as well as looking at relatedness across the population, and is there some correlation between associations and relatedness, which there seems to be. Now, a few minutes on acoustics and the night work. It's an amazingly beautiful place to study at night. This is a time lapse of elephants coming in, viewed from the bunker. I'm going to read a paragraph out of the book I wrote in 2007 during this period while I was studying the elephants. Now, those were two very fast videos, but this is the pace of an elephant. He's going to decide if he's going to move forward. It was after twilight on a new moon night when I saw 3 bulls on the northern horizon just before closing into the bunker for the night. I sat on top and waited for them to walk in. In the near darkness, I felt like I was suddenly in the depths of an open ocean, sitting within my little submersible, phosphorescent stars suspended in the distance as the bulls approached. Their gait was so soft and fluid that they seemed to float in a luminescent sea like blue whales in a bottomless expanse. The major and minor Magellanic clouds in the Milky Way looking like the spouting of water through elephantine blowholes in the deep. A soft padding of heels flowed by me as the bulls walked past the bunker and onto the waterhole. Just 10 feet away, 3 pairs of eyes remained forward, not even a sideways glance towards me, although I knew they were aware of my presence by the position of their trunk. Just the tip towards me, absorbing my scent as they passed. Their breathing was slow and methodical through the ends of lanky trunks held inches above the ground. With one exhalation after another, they calmly took me in as if everything was in order. I had finally become part of the scenery to them. The more I immersed myself in their world, the more questions I had, even down to the simple positioning of their feet while walking. Over time, I saw that an elephant's mood could be determined by its footfalls. If it was calm, it would place its weight on its heels like these bulls were doing. But if it was upset or nervous and felt the need to be stealthy, it would place its weight on its toes and literally tiptoe. And that's when I started to focus on how much time they spent leaning forward on their feet and listening for vibrations. So this is a bull vocalization in the range of 10 hertz, and it's actually a chorus between two bulls, which hasn't been described. The bulls are quite vocal, just like the females are when they depart. Bonded bulls will engage in interactive vocalizations, just like the females. The females' fundamental frequency is about 20. The males are that much bigger than the females, and their vocalization falls in the 10 hertz. Now, what's interesting here is that if you put out a microphone array by 800 meters, most of this is gone. So it's really the lower frequencies that propagate into the distance, and that's what these individuals are cueing into. And the patterns that these calls, we're calling them interactive vocalizations, where let's say the matriarch says, okay, it's time to go, and I emit my rumble. Well, the next in line is waiting until she's finished, and then they start their rumble, and then the next one starts the rumble. So what they do is take a 3-second call and make it into 9 seconds, and then repeat it more often. So these calls can be detected much further away than just one individual calling on their own. Now, part of my time was spent working with farmers to try and help them keep elephants out of their fields. So this is something that I did to see if I could help them. And this is a call that I'm playing back to them in the context of lions hunting. Elephants are nervous. So I'm playing it from the bunker, and the matriarch comes up to see what is going on here. And then it's these 3 calls that really elicit a response. So, from a management perspective, this is pretty successful. But of course, when we play this, we have to be very careful and make sure the elephants drink enough, and you don't want them to habituate. But every year in Africa, there's different crises and different situations that one might use, whether you can use beehive noises or this kind of call. It's always going to have to change, but you always have to try something. And this was one of the things that we tried. But because I knew exactly what these elephants would do, I got really curious about another behavior, and that is this freezing behavior coordinated with the group. So these elephants are about to leave the waterhole, but they suddenly freeze, and then sometimes they freeze mid-stride, really often taking one foot off the ground and placing more weight on the others. And even the little ones are doing it. This often is coordinated with the arrival of another group or some kind of seismic noise, a vehicle. And so I wanted to see if we played back signals, known signals into the ground, would elephants be able to respond? I had already figured out that their high sound pressure level vocalizations travel in the ground. So at 120 decibels, an elephant rumble couples with the surface of the ground and propagates along the surface of the ground. Well, we wanted to know if elephants actually use that. And so we took some shakers and some geophones, and this from the car industry and the home theater industry. You mount them to your joist of the house, and you get some nice rumbles. Very convenient for us. So we calibrate our system such that we know that there's only the signal coming out of the ground and nothing coming out of the air, and about what the expected signal would be. And so we let the elephants come in, we let them drink, and then at a time that's not known to the observers, we start the experiment. And we're looking for freezing behavior, for bunching up into tighter groups. So here's the freeze, and then they'll bunch up into their tighter family groups, and then they leave the waterhole much sooner than they would if they didn't have this presentation. So here's the types of data that we collect. And it worked so well that we wondered, well, what if we take a familiar call and an unfamiliar call of the same context and see how sophisticated are they in detecting Auntie Mabel from some distant cousin that they'd never met? So we put these two calls into the ground and found that they were much more responsive to the familiar call than they were to the unfamiliar call. So that means there's a pretty sophisticated level of vibration detection going on in their feet and trunks. Which got us curious about, well, if we were to give an elephant a foot test, just like a hearing test, how would we go about doing that? Well, we started by going to the Oakland Zoo, and Colleen Kinsley kindly let us work with the lovely Donna here. Donna the elephant is standing on a force plate with a thumper underneath it. So she will be able to tell us when she feels vibrations. So it's designed just like a hearing test where you reduce the level by 6 dB, by 12, by 18, and once she fails the experiment, which is 50 force choice experiments, then she goes up to 3 dB down, and you oscillate around a threshold and figure out that's the sensitivity of her feet. Let's watch them at work here.
Good girl, Donna.
So she touches the middle target to start. She'll touch the triangle when she doesn't feel a vibration. No vibration, touch the triangle, she gets a treat. Now we turn the level of vibrations up so you can hear a clicking sound. So that sound she's cueing into.
Such a good girl.
But under normal circumstances, she won't hear that. We're just doing it for the video. So then she goes down, and once she realizes what we're doing, and she really wants to succeed, she gets better and better at focusing. Well, and then we got a little greedy about what else we could ask her to do, and thinking about the largest cerebral cortex, particularly the temporal lobe, and the capacity for memory and spatial learning. And we all say that elephants have this great memory, but what is the proof? How can we really nail down, aside from building anecdotes, how can we test this? So we got some bananas, and we present her with a banana and have her select a picture of a banana. What that means is if you can represent an object in your mind, that means you can plan around that object. You can think, okay, there's a marula fruit tree. I know when it ripens. I know how to get to it. So it's the first step in understanding long-term memory is to show that you can visualize an object in your mind that is representative of a real thing. So that's where we're at with her, and then you have to do further challenges of, okay, if we put a pumpkin in the bull yard, but we show her a picture of where it is, would she be able to tell from that picture where the pumpkin is? So that's for later. But for now, she's a pretty interesting subject. Now, this next piece, we're always trying to add some conservation component to what we're doing. And when we played back vocalizations to the females, the alarm calls, the males didn't really care. But we want to know more about how they're detecting these signals, so we play back an estrus call. Now this we get some results. So we're looking at how he's spending a lot of time on the ground, flapping his ears, pressing down on the ground with his trunk, and he comes right past the source. This is the source right here. Goes right past it, keeps on going, looking for his lovely lady. As urgent as an elephant can be at high speed. So this worked so well with Beckham that we thought, wow, what a great tool. What are we going to do with this? What we realized is that musk bulls travel far and wide looking for females, and they often break through fences, get outside the park, and cause trouble. And once they're out there, how do you get them back in? You know, they fly with a helicopter, they shoot in the air, and it's all traumatic and aggressive. Well, what if you just invite him back in? So we're busy working with the rangers to set up a system to, by every 500 meters, invite the elephant back into the park, because it's a beeline. It was very impressive. He can really localize that signal. The other conservation application in the midst of measuring vocalizations and footfalls in the ground, you can hear that sound. This is an elephant walking across the geophone. Now, the earth is an elastic medium, and sound comes from walking on it. This is a whole herd walking across this spot. And what's interesting here is that the elephant footfall, the weight of the foot as they walk, is very similar to the human. And we have figured out an algorithm to extract each one of these species so that you could do remote censusing with a seismic instrument and know how many elephants and what time of day they came into the waterhole. So we're working on that. But in the midst of this, then the whole poaching crisis has evolved, and so we've come up with 3 tiers. We can easily separate out human footfalls, gunshots, even turn on cameras when something bad is happening. So we're developing a whole series of these sensors, again in 3 phases: detect poachers, to provide an early warning system of elephants approaching farms, or in India we're working with a group to stop elephants from getting hit by trains, and also monitoring. The 3rd phase would be a passive long-term system where text message or whatever kind of information could be sent back to the ranger station, but this is in areas where they can't afford to go out and monitor all the time. So showing a police presence is one thing, but otherwise, just conservation-wise, who's using what hole when, and all of a sudden this month no one's using this water hole. What happened? They go out and they find out the water hole was broken or the pump broke. So that kind of thing is what we've been designing. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is a biomimetic hearing aid for people with hearing impairments that was developed from this research on the vibrotactile sensitivity of the elephant's foot, where people with hearing impairments devote a lot of their real estate in their brain to vibrations. So they have the somatosensory cortex like we do, but their auditory cortex is not receiving information from sound, so they process vibrations through the auditory cortex as well. So they have double the amount of real estate dedicated to vibrations, so they're incredibly sensitive to vibrations, and we're developing a tool that would help with either building a language or even just basic things around the house, like the doorbell's ringing, or the military is interested in it for strategic purposes to communicate by the hand where they can't speak between walls and that kind of thing. These are the people we'd like to acknowledge funding and collaborators, and I'm happy to answer any questions.